Andor Season 2 is about to take Star Wars into a new era, but not in the way you might expect.
You wanna fight?
This time we're not just watching the early sparks of rebellion, we're stepping into the war itself. The moment that scattered rebel factions collide, alliances are tested, and the Empire tightens its grip like never before.
The ISB will be taking the lead going forward.
But here's the real game changer. This season isn't just setting up Rogue One, it's reshaping everything we knew about the rebellion's origins. The cost of freedom and the sacrifices that built the galaxy's last hope.
I'd rather die trying to take them down than die giving them what they want.
Before we jump in, don't forget to leave a thumbs up on today's video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to catch more Star Wars videos, then you're in the right place. Now, with all that out of the way, let's dive into Andor Season 2 and how it will change Star Wars in ways we never saw coming.
The Empire is a disease that thrives in darkness. It is never more alive than when we sleep.
Alright, so Andor Season 1, it's fair to say, took its time. It let us marinate in the slow burn tension of a galaxy quietly falling apart. We saw Cassian go from a guy trying to survive to a man willing to risk everything for something bigger. We saw Mon Mothma caught in a political stranglehold, forced to make impossible choices just to keep the rebellion alive. And we saw the Empire stepping up its game, tightening its grip and making sure that even the smallest acts of defiance came with brutal consequences. Season 1 showed us where the rebellion starts, small acts of defiance, secrets in the shadows, but Season 2, that's where it all explodes. The rebellion isn't just forming, it's making its first real moves, and with that comes a level of risk we haven't seen before. And unlike last season where Cassian was pulled into the fight by circumstance,
What happened?
this time he's in it for real. Every move the rebellion makes is pushing us closer to Rogue One, and with that comes some of the most high stakes decisions in the history of Star Wars. Now, that's not to say we're jumping straight to the Rebel Alliance we know from A New Hope. The rebellion isn't a unified movement yet, it's a collection of different factions, each with their own ideas about how to fight back. You've got Luthen, who's been orchestrating this thing from the shadows, willing to sacrifice anyone and anything if it means victory. Then there's Mon Mothma, trying to keep the rebellion politically viable while losing control of everything she once held dear. And of course you've got Sol Guerrera, who's already on the edge of being too extreme for the cause. And this is where things get really interesting because we're about to see how deep these divisions go. Mon Mothma is still playing the political game, but for how much longer? Luthen is operating in the shadows, but when does his secrecy become a liability? And as for Sol Guerrera, he's really the wild card, the one who might just push things too far. Every choice they make, every alliance they try to form, comes with a cost. And when you've got people like Luthen and Saul in the same fight, sooner or later someone's going to take it too far. But that's just the thing about war, lines get blurred and ideologies clash. And what starts as a movement built on hope and freedom can quickly turn into the very thing they're trying to destroy. And Season 2 is about to show us exactly how that happens. Now, this is where things start to take a turn. Cassian isn't just becoming a rebel, he's being forged into one. That means every choice he makes, every mission he takes, is shaping him into the man we meet in Rogue One. And that transformation is not just about fighting the Empire, it's about surviving the rebellion itself, because the rebels aren't this well-oiled machine yet. They're fractured, paranoid, and dangerous in their own way.
You have people everywhere, don't you?
You've got Luthen, who's willing to literally burn everything to the ground to light the way forward, and then we've got Mon Mothma desperately clinging to the last strands of diplomacy, even as she's forced to make impossible sacrifices. And with Sol Guerrera, who's about to come too extreme for even the rebels to handle, that's where things start to get messy, because the rebels, they can't agree on how to fight this war, so how do they even stand a chance of winning it? Anyways, whilst this is all playing out, the Empire's watching, tightening its grip and hunting down anyone that knows too much. The ISB isn't just investigating rebels anymore, they're erasing them. The Death Star project isn't just a background detail in it all, it's the Empire's most closely guarded secret at this time, and anyone who even stumbles onto it is as good as dead. And that brings us to the real question, who doesn't make it out of this alive? Because in war, not everyone survives. And right now we're starting down a season that's going to break a lot of these characters, physically, mentally, in ways that they're not prepared for. Anyways, here's where things get really interesting. So far we've been talking about the rebellion coming together, but what if Season 2 is actually about it falling apart before it even begins?
You told me we were building a network.
What were my words?
Because as much as this season is about fighting the Empire, it's also about the rebels fighting each other. We already know from Rogue One that Saul Guerrera doesn't last as part of the main rebellion. By the time we meet him in the movie, he's an extremist operating in the shadows, completely cut off from Mon Mothma and the rest of the movement. But what Andor Season 2 will likely show us is why that split happens, and it might not just be as simple as Saul being too extreme. What if the real betrayal doesn't come from him, but from the rebellion itself? Because let's be honest, Luthen and Mon are already making deals in the dark.
Someone who? To bring into the circle?
Deciding who is and isn't worth keeping in this fight, and if Saul starts making moves they can't control, do they decide he's too much of a risk? Do they set him up? Do they sell him out to the Empire just to protect the bigger picture? And here's where things take an even darker turn. If we do see Saul Guerrero getting betrayed by his own allies, there's one name that could be behind it, Grand Moff Tarkin. Now we know the ISB's crackdown is going to be at its peak, and if Tarkin does show up, it could be as the one who's ordering mass purges of rebel groups, which could directly affect Saul's partisans. Now that we're seeing the formation of the Rebel Alliance, what cracks are already forming beneath the surface, because if this season is about anything, it's about showing us that sometimes the first battle isn't against the enemy, it's about the people who are supposed to be on your side. And speaking of sacrifices, this is where things start to get a little brutal, because the choices made here won't just define the fight against the Empire, they'll shape the very foundation of the rebellion itself. And yeah, so this is where things start to get real, because up until this point we've seen the cracks forming within the rebellion, the fractures between its leaders, and the choices that will decide who actually makes it to Rogue One. But now we're at the point where these choices start to have real consequence, and not everyone is making it out of this season alive.
I burned my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see.
Luthen has always been one step ahead. He's been pulling the strings, setting things in motion, sacrificing pawns to win the bigger game. But here's the problem: what happens when the game outgrows the player? Because Season 1, it made it pretty clear that Luthen has already given up everything. His soul, his peace, his future. He's burned it all for a war he knows he won't live to see won. And if that's the case, then Season 2 is setting up the one thing we all kinda know is coming. Luthen's not gonna make it out of this alive. The real question is, how does he go out? Does he sacrifice himself in one final move that forces the rebel factions together? Does he take the fall to keep Mon Mothma's political cover intact? Or does he push things a little too far, to the point where even the rebellion sees him as a liability? Because if we learned anything from Andor Season 1, it's that being on the same side doesn't necessarily guarantee your safety. And speaking of being unsafe, that brings us to Cassian himself. We already know where he ends up in Rogue, fully committed to the cause, cold and ruthless when he needs to be, but Cassian in Season 1, he wasn't that guy yet. He still had attachments, he still had people he cared about.
I'll be worried about you all the time.
Still had a reason to believe that maybe there was a way out of this fight. So the big question is, what does the Empire take from him that finally turns him into the soldier we meet in Rogue One? And as the bodies pile up, as entire rebel cells begin to disappear, Cassian will realise that there's no turning back, because once you see what the Empire is truly capable of, you can't walk away from it. And if that's the case, then Season 2 isn't just about Cassian fighting for the rebellion. It's about him losing everything that made him Cassian in the first place. Now, moving on, that brings us to the real power shift behind the scenes. Because while the rebellion is inevitably tearing itself apart, at least at the start of things, and Cassian is losing the last people he cares about, the Empire is already looking beyond all of this, because if there's one secret they're willing to kill for, it's the Death Star. And this is where things get pretty wild, because up until this point we've been talking about the cracks forming within the rebellion and the personal sacrifices that had to be made to shape the war. But the Empire, they're not just reacting to rebel attacks anymore, they're already moving past this conflict entirely. While the rebellion is still figuring itself out, the Empire is working to secure its true endgame. And that's where the Death Star comes in. We all know from Rogue One that the Death Star was the Empire's most closely guarded secret.
There is no Death Star.
And Season 1 already planted the seeds by showing us that Cassian unknowingly helped build it back on Narkina 5. But what Season 2 could reveal is just how far the Empire are willing to go to keep that secret buried. We're talking about Imperial purges, high-ranking officers being silenced, and entire rebel cells disappearing before they even realise what they're up against. And here's the thing, what if Cassian starts to suspect something's going on, something's being built long before Rogue One? Think about it, the ISB is cracking down harder than ever, but what if Cassian starts noticing a pattern, missions going dark, key informants disappearing, something that doesn't add up? What if Season 2 subtly sets up Cassian's fascination with tracking down Galen Erso, knowing there's some kind of weapon being built, even if he doesn't know what it is just yet? And then there's Mon Mothma. If anyone's going to piece this together, it's going to be her. But by the end of Season 2, she might not even have the chance to. Because as much as she's fighting for the cause, she's also running out of time. The walls are closing in, her political cover is starting to crumble.
Mon Mothma is of great interest here.
And when that moment comes, she may have to leave everything behind, including her family. And if Tarkin shows up this season, it won't just be as a military leader, it will be as the architect of the Empire's final crackdown. We already know the Gorman massacre is coming, an event that will finally push Mon Mothma into open rebellion, but what if Andor shows us the moment she realises the full scale of what the Empire is capable of? Because when the dust settles, the question isn't just how the rebellion survives, it's how many people had to be erased just to keep the Death Star hidden. So at this point it's clear that Andor Season 2 isn't just a continuation of what came before, it's the moment the war truly begins. Season 1 gave us the slow burn rise of Cassian Andor, showing us how a single person gets radicalized against a system that's impossible to escape. But now we're stepping into something much bigger. The scattered flames of rebellion are about to ignite into a full-scale war. And what's fascinating is we know how this ends, but we have no idea how it gets there. This season is going to reshape everything we thought we knew about the rebellion. It's going to show us the sacrifices that had to be made, the betrayals that tore people apart, and the hidden conflicts that don't always make it into the history books.
There's no way out alive. Of that you must be sure.
Rogue One already set the tone for what this war costs, but Andor is pulling the curtain back even further, showing the brutal road the rebellion had to walk before they even had a fighting chance. And that's what makes this season so exciting. Because when you think about it, Andor Season 1 and Rogue One kind of feel like they exist in two completely different genres. One's a grounded, methodical thriller that explores power and oppression in a way Star Wars has never done before. The other is a high-stakes war movie packed with espionage, daring heists, and a last stand for the galaxy's future. But now we're seeing these two worlds collide. And that's what I'm most excited for, watching these different tones and stories come together. How does Cassian transition from the man we meet in Season 1 to the hardened operative leading a mission to steal the Death Star plans? How do the rebel factions overcome their divisions to become something capable of taking on the Empire? And most importantly, who doesn't survive the journey? This season isn't just about showing us how the rebellion came together, it's about showing us what it had to lose just to get there. So what are you most excited for in Andor Season 2? As always, drop your thoughts, theories and wilder speculations down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our last one, where we go into more depth on Luthen Rael. Anyway, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next one, and may the Force be with you.